Welcome, Tirzah Shirai, to Mystical Sisterhood today. Tirzah is the founder of the Venusian School of Business, and we're here to talk about topics ranging from creating a heart and soul-centered business to balancing our feminine and masculine energies, and so much in between. I'm excited to explore how we can lean into really ideas that are at the forefront of creating change in our culture. And on a pre-interview, Tirzah and I just talked about how the time is now for these messages and how they're gaining momentum and giving people permission to perhaps go new places in their lives and discover new paths that are in front of them. So with that, welcome, and we'll see you in the episode. So welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood, and I'm your host, Maureen Spielman. And Tirzah, it is so wonderful to be here with you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Maureen, for having me today. It is my absolute pleasure to be here to share this time and space with you.
Yes, I know. And this podcast amazes me so much because I have had the opportunity to meet with so many women who are creating really beautiful masterpieces in their own life. And I think that you're one of them. And we're going to share your current creation and what you're birthing and bringing into the world. But I just want to first possibly, the question I always write down a few questions and then I go a million different directions. But I just wondered about you. We've only met once, but did you feel like you were tuned in to something bigger or something a little more spiritual or a connectedness when you were young? Or is it something that you discovered a little bit later?
From a very young age, I think it was clear that, and I have now a 4-year-old, so I'm very cognizant of how I raise him. So I would definitely say I was, intuiting and feeling other multidimensional realities, shall we say. And that was quickly squashed. Like, we don't talk about that. We don't communicate with that. We don't. And absolutely, I would say it was I was more in that world than I was in this world. And so, raising the next generation, I'm very conscious of how I engage with that.
I think that's fascinating because I have heard, and it has been the topic of some of the conversations I've had, very fascinating about even a new child coming into the world. People call crystal children, star children, whatever the name is, but sort of like a heightened consciousness. And I love it that you're tuned into him and just a different way of parenting and bringing the kids up. I find that creates a really wide berth to be there for our children, but to allow them to explore and not quiet down what you're kind of saying are these inborn places within them that often get squashed over time because of school and just conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful. And, I love to look at huge swaths of time, like epochs. And so if you look at, I always love this term, like we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Mm-hmm. If you begin to look at things generationally, you can see how we were set up to have this kind of honor and privilege at our time to be able to explore these things, right? Our grandparents or great grandparents went through things like the Great Depression. And I love to look at how we play in this generation for future generations to walk on this earth.
So there's a lot of opportunity right now, it feels like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I venture to guess we're similar in this. Like, I believe that we sign up to come in exactly to be this age at this time for this reason, right? We all have a different kind of constellation that we carry. And I believe, my son signed up to be exactly how old he is, and I signed up to be how old I am to really have these different experiences of this time and space.
I love that. And I think often just the age that we come into, if you call it an awakening or just kind of getting in touch with new information and new wisdom that really lights us up, it's all perfect for us. I can look at myself and say like, oh, it took me quite some time, or it's taken me like a fair amount of time to learn these lessons. But then if I look at when I did and how fairly quickly we can take in new information and begin to create change in our lives and develop, work with our limiting perspectives and develop new perspective. It's all perfect. And I have that now. And for that, I'm grateful.
Absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
can relate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And also how things, when I was a little girl, it was not okay, at least where I grew up, I'm sure where most people grew up, to talk about things from the other side of the threshold or from the spiritual realm. It was not, something that's permissible. And, I would say, because we both kind of float in the business world, that it feels like the last thing to fall is the business world. It's still, I think, in the upper echelon of business. People are definitely not sitting in the boardrooms that I'm in talking about spiritual matters. And yet I think, my journey over the past 4 years have been, I am not alone, right? I am not alone in this inner journey and how that's reflected in my desire for what I do and how I show up in the world.
Yeah. And the more you practice, you learn and you practice and you integrate it, then you begin to embody it. And then I think you can't help but show up in these new ways. Yeah, because I think about it, I expose my husband to a lot of this conversation, yet he goes into a very traditional financial job, and he's not going to be the first one to be like, oh, well, let's talk about these things in this new, just what someone would say, like, oh, that's pretty woo woo, that doesn't belong here. But maybe we'd be surprised, and I know this is your work, about how many people are actually becoming interested in this conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been really the light for me at the end of this, tunnel, was realizing that I wasn't alone, even though I was in this, kind of upper echelon of business.
Yeah.
I felt, man, this is only, I can't be excited about the same things. I'm not driven by the same things. The same things don't matter to me anymore. And so much of my identity was hinged on those things. And I really felt like everything was breaking down, like composting. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, what is happening? And I felt isolated and alone. And so much of my journey in bringing, Venusian School of Business forward, I have learned that not only am I not alone, but so many people, it's like this elephant in the room that, maybe outside of this circle, people just have not been talking about as openly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a reality.
I love it, because what we're kind of talking about then is ushering a lot of the principles that are talked about on Mystical Sisterhood. So if a listener's been around for a while, they're going to be very comfortable with the conversation. But how you said business has been an area that's still, I don't know if you'd say, like, really under the patriarchy and the old ways of doing things. And I often think of, because a lot of my volunteerism was in schools too, because even with the introduction of mindfulness and social emotional learning, constructs that are these big systems, they're just harder to change. And so, but then when you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, instead of looking at from that perspective of like, oh, this is challenging or harder, I thought of like, what's the opportunity? And that seems like could be like a really fruitful way to come at existing structures.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, isn't it interesting how our school system does reflect kind of the needs of the times? So much of our school system was set up by things like the Rockefellers or the Fords, who wanted people to really sit, raise their hand, ask to go to the restroom. And now our education institutions are being challenged. They're being pushed to the limit, and they're being required to evolve and grow along with the needs that we have, right? To solve these really big, imminent problems and issues and ways that we look at the world and interact with the world. Our education system needs to serve the evolution of humanity.
Yeah.
And sorry, I have a senior dog who's got up and he's walking around, so there's a little bit of noise in the background.
He's good. This is life, right?
Yeah.
So you saw a need, you saw a deep need, and then you were having your own experience of, like you were describing as, I don't know if it was a breakdown, but you said like the inner composting and change and desire. And it feels like a kind of going towards just a newness and a new perspective and a new way of doing things. And so how did the Venusian School of Business come about? Was it a light bulb moment? Was it just a series of of little moments that led to you forming this, and having also, I'm guessing, the courage to leave structure you had worked in for a long time and go on your own new path.
Yeah, I would say, for me, like we talked about from childhood, I was very enmeshed in the spirit realm. And I also was born into poverty, and I was very driven by the material world. I was very driven to achieve the material definition of success. And, I wanted to be a millionaire before I was 20, and I had all of these ambitions. So I had these two really this tension of these two tracks inside me. And when 2020 happened, it was almost like these two worlds collided. And, I had separate friend groups, and I had separate events that I would attend, and I had separate almost like wardrobes that I would wear that felt very natural. Like I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this. And they would inform each other, but they were not really meshed in the way that they are now. And for me, it took, my business was shut down. So all of our locations were in California. For those of you that were not in California in 2020, we were salons. So we were completely closed, all of them, for a year. And this really was a gift for me personally, not for my business, but for me, because it allowed me to really stop. It's like everything came to a grinding halt. And I was able to really reflect on, I was forced, I would say, to reflect on how these two were going to come together. And throughout my dreams and my meditations and my prayers, this, what now today is VSB, just kept coming to me, and it just kept coming. And I was like, not now. I really, I read Big Magic. You're supposed to go on to the next person now, move on. And it was like, no, this is meant to come through you. And so I felt like everything, it was requiring me, I had built this business, and it was requiring me to talk about things like reincarnation and chakras and the spirit realm within business. And that felt really scary to me, because that is not what we talk about in board meetings. That is not what we talk about in our L10. It's just like not part of the conversation. And yet the more I started doing a little market research, the more I could see that we were all starving for this conversation. And so I guess I've also had this recognition, although I love the business building and the handbags and the cars that came along the way, I've always deeply understood that we don't take that with us.
Yeah.
That although those things are fun to play with and to enjoy along the way, ultimately, we know for sure, we've all lost someone that we love at this point. We know that we don't take those things with us. Right. And so where is the real investment in this human life? And I've always known it's that inner experience, right? It's how much we loved. It's how many fears we conquered. It's, what I call the language, my tradition is the light body, right? Our etheric body. That's the body that animates this body. And it's the body, and many traditions, right? We can look at the ancient Vedas. We can look at the Buddhist tradition. They have a different name for it, right? So there is this spiritual truth, right? It's like a spiritual science, a perennial truth that runs through. And we know that that's the body that we take with us. So I knew that even though it seemed crazy to walk away from a company that was a $30 million company, to exit that and to move on, that's not what the outside world, what my advisors would have told me to do, right? My mentors, but my other advisors, was very clear that that's the investment that it was time to make. Although I'm making it sound very easy. It was not. It was a real inner struggle. But eventually that, my recognition of where our true investments belong really won out overall.
Ooh, such a good story. I was wondering too, I love how you're talking about, when we exit the earth, because I too am very in touch with that. And the more inner work I do, the more I realize that it's my connections and my relationships. And then when I had a sister lose a couple loved ones within the last week, and you really start to get that message. Maybe at an earlier age than we even used to get it. I don't know, but it is true. And at the same time, we are living on the human plane, and we want to have thriving businesses, and it's okay to want to have that too. And so balancing that. And I think before we started, we set an intention together and that question or the statement came out of, how can this podcast today be of the highest service? And I think when I think of Mystical Sisterhood, or you're thinking of the Venusian School of Business, it's like, how can these be of high service? And that goes to the point of the heart-centered, soul-centered businesses that are being called for now. They are at the forefront. They're very important for us to step into what's coming to us. Like you said, like, it would not leave me alone. I could not do this, right? And so all the things together about, yes, we are a soul, and yes, we're here, and we want to thrive, and we want to be abundant. And I think not only be abundant, but claim the birthright of our abundance.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like for me personally, you know, it's kind of like I've went through these stages, and I see people, you know, all through my feed and that I know in the world going through these stages. And I personally was I built vision boards from, I think, 16 years old, like before they were a thing. And I went through that phase, right? And I saw the majority of the things that I continued to want, I saw them manifest in the world. And now I have moved out of that phase that I, you know, really affectionately call manifesting, which is like, it's all about me and what I want. Mm-hmm. And I see this impulse being born in the world that really wants to move out of that. So not that there's anything wrong and bad, right? It's like my child, you know, before he's running and playing sports, he had to crawl. And that's a very important. If you skip crawling, there mm-hmm. is a mountain of evidence that show you're going to have developmental delays along the way. So if you skip manifesting, if you skip, I'm going to manifest this and put it on my vision board and see it come to life, mm-hmm. you're missing a crucial, important part of the journey. And there are a growing number of us that are now being called to align with something bigger, wider, deeper, greater than that. And, you know, that's personally where I like to work with people. And, you know, I will work with people in discovering their purpose. And so I love what you just said. And I feel like, you know, again, another kind of elephant is that people are really feeling this call. Like, yeah, it's nice if you've manifested the private planes and the handbags and the private clubs. There is a point, though, where mm-hmm. it becomes mm-hmm. more than a little empty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a little like, hey, if it's great to crawl when that is the time and place that you're in. But mm-hmm. when you're 5 and you're still crawling, well, that is a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. And you can have all these different profiles too of people. What do we really associate sort of like a definition of manifesting? That's why I've recently been thinking of it more like, no, we were born with this ability to manifest, and we've just really hidden it away or really quieted it down, but that it's here for us. It's just the uncovering. And it makes me think of too, this idea of like, what is really soul fulfilling? You just called it purpose, because some people are the manifestors of money, and they can have all the money in the world, yet lacking in other things that are going to just feel the qualities of how they want to feel. So, but I also appreciate what you say about the vision boards and manifesting, because I found in my own journey of kind of discovering, you know, all these different things. And I've gone, you know, not deep, but like more than just your toe in the water on a lot of them. And you're like, oh, you're so into it at the time. And then you go down like 6 months, a year, and you're like, oh, that's not as resonant. But I think a really funny thing about that is sometimes how some of it comes back again. And you're like, oh, let me look at that with new eyes 6 years later. And that's kind of fun too. And you can say, because you've created the School of Business, and, you know, how did you pick what was most important for you in that? And do you also find yourself like just growing and changing all the same, like all the time?
I mean, I'm sure we've all heard the term, like being an entrepreneur is like building an airplane as you're trying to fly it. And I think the more like there's this concept of an imago. Have you heard of the term mm-hmm. like in a relationship, right? And I believe that this also applies not only to our relationships, but also to our business, because our business is often made up of these inklings or these gifts that weave back to childhood. Mm-hmm. And this, you know, project, business, service that we're being called to birth in the world also is made up and entangled with our deepest fears, our deepest inadequacies.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think as a result of that, right, if we're not just, showing up for a 9 to 5 that doesn't require anything of us, if we're really embarking on this journey, right, a human purpose, a human life is meant to contribute to the cosmos at large.
Yeah.
Well, you're never going to arrive there, right? This is going to be a journey where you're constantly pushed to the edge of what you think is possible for yourself, for humanity. You are constantly pushed to the edge. And, I was writing about this earlier. I feel like we have to normalize this idea of business being a spiritual practice. It really is a spiritual practice. It requires us to grow and to become bigger than ourselves.
Oh, yeah. I have a couple thoughts about that. And I'm guessing that you see often, and I've trained in 3 coaching programs over the last 6 years. And so, and they've brought me different aspects and skills and viewpoints and wisdom and all the things. And so I've trained with a lot of coaches. And what I can see is that the things that hold us back can really prevent us from succeeding. I'll just take the coaching industry as one because I know it pretty well now. And it's really hard. Like, I feel like it's almost like if, 0 is at the bottom, like in 30%, like, I don't know why the number 30%, but I feel like it's like we get that far. And if you can push through that ceiling that's like that, it feels low to me. Then the gold is on the other side. And that's my own interpretation of it at this moment of time. But do you see a little bit of that? And is that a reason that you love this work, is to help people kind of cross the threshold?
Yeah, often what is the success? So there's this saying that I love, which is that success and failure are on the same road. You just, once you hit failure, you have to keep going, right? And it's this idea of, what if I told you that you had to fail like I have, right, 7 times before you had a success? And I think we just live in a society that really only puts forward success, right? I wasn't on Good Morning America or Forbes talking about the 7 failures. I was on talking about the 1 success. And the issue with that is we really need to normalize failure. It's our own inner disconnect from being comfortable with failure, right? Yep, I failed. Look at all the lessons I learned, right? Because I can point to the 1 success that I had and all the failures, that those were all gifts I had to unwrap to be able to make this, right? So I think the more we can normalize, we have to keep going. And we also have to have the discernment to fail fast when something isn't working.
Yeah.
So it's this great saying that at one level of consciousness, something seems opposing. And at another level, you go, oh, that's the same thing. That's amazing. It's totally connected.
And what do you see? Because with that, I have the question of, so what do most people do with failure? Number one. And I think like you just said something about the sort of plight or like of the solopreneur, entrepreneur these days is, I feel personally, and I've said this in other podcasts, that there are so many choices now as to how to grow your business that it is dizzying. And it's an area too that you can put a lot of money down. And I'm thinking like the Venusian School of Business with this kind of approach kind of put into this container so intentionally and thoughtfully could be really beneficial for people on the path of creating what's new for them. Because I just find that everything is so disparate that it has kind of had me going in a lot of different directions. And for 2024, I just wanted to create like, Maureen, simplify. You've got this beautiful podcast, and do like 1 or 2 things to the side, not 10 things, because that's kind of like in tandem with the failure. Like we can get burnout and we have great things to offer. So how do we keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most people have recognized a speeding up, right? A concept that days are flying, months are flying, and sometimes years are flying. And this is true because of the amount of information that we have being thrown at us, right? It is actually, time, we all know, is an artificial construct. And the amount of information flying at us is actually speeding up our experience of time. So how do we counteract that? Well, wisdom. So we have an abundance of information and a real lack of wisdom. And so how we work with that at VSB and how I work with that is really tuning into, and this has become a buzzword, so I'm hesitant to use it, but it really is true here, is diving into these traditions that are thousands of years old, right? The ancient mystery schools that are more relevant today than ever. And I find, it's tuning into a deep sense of wisdom so that we are able to really chart a course, follow it, and simplify is so important. I mean, I'm in the process of simplifying everything in my life, right? So the more time speeds up, the more we can shed and simplify, the more we're able to root into these deepest truths that are really going to ground us. And then we're able to really grow our business, right? Amidst the noise, amidst all of the things.
It's a beautiful explanation. And I think a lot of people are going to feel that, how you just explained the speeding up of time. And I certainly do. And one thing that I have been kind of tapping into too, and you kind of just said it, was anchoring each day with the principles that I believe in. So and I don't know how you do this in your own life or the ritual, I always like to ask about ritual in your own life. But if I believe that this is a friendly universe that is here for me, where my relationships are thriving, where my work and the flow of money is thriving and flowing, and it comes to me with ease and grace, it's almost like I believe all those things, and yet I want to anchor in them every day. Like this is just a recent realization I've been having, because I can be I've never claimed being an ADHD type of person. I don't really go by labels so much, but I think because of what you're saying about the information coming at us like crazy, I'll say like, oh, I want to learn from this teacher, and I'm going to watch their great series of videos, and I'll be like 5 of 7 videos in, and something else catches my eye and I don't finish the 5 to 7 videos. And that for me then keeps me at the surface of things. And so I don't know, do you have rituals like that keep you anchored, or they're your truths that you can't live without?
Sure. So much to unpack in what you just said. So first of all, I love that you're using the word ritual, because the ritual is what we use. It's almost like a portal that allows us to, I don't want to sound too esoteric, but allows us to almost burrow through time. So it allows us to connect with a deeper experience of time that is outside of the forward movement of time, right? So ritual is so important, and we have seasonal rituals. So in our house, you'll see like seasons explode in our house. It's just that, we bring the outdoors in. We really live in ritual daily. I have some, things that I do as well to really bring as much ritual as we can. Now, here's another thing where I love looking at these ancient truths, right? These are not my truths. I'm grounding into some incredible masters here. That we are in the phase of human development, right? If you think of us as humanity is in this beautiful womb, we're still developing. We have inner senses that we're all developing at different rates, right? Just like one child starts to walk or, speak a little more quickly than others, it doesn't make them wrong or bad. They're just like at a different phase, right? Or how a teenager is different than a baby. None of it is wrong. It's just at a different phase. So humans are in the phase where we are developing our will. So not only what you just said, where you're like, wait, why have I been on Instagram for 20 minutes and I picked up my phone to do this other thing? Or worse, you walk into a room where you pick up your phone and you end up in you don't even remember why you picked up your phone. So the more we can really acknowledge that and observe it as, what is happening is our human will is developing still. So our will has not been perfected yet. And there are exercises that seem deceptively simple. But if you want to see how weak human will truly is, make a New Year's resolution or tell yourself, so here's an exercise I try to do every day. I did it today. Luckily, I did it. But it's really hard to do. And it has taken me years to be able to consistently do it, like 6 out of 7 days. And it takes 3 seconds to do. So in the morning when you wake up, you pick a time of the day, right? I pick 11:11. And you say, I'm going to do this one insignificant thing. So it can't be something like, a goal or something that has purpose for you. It has to be insignificant. So I make a triangle with my finger, right? Or you can twist an earring. You can play with a necklace. At this time, I'm going to do this thing. And it doesn't matter if you're on a call, if you're in a podcast, you can twirl that ring, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You will be amazed how often you'll just, oh my gosh, I just missed that. But this is like going to the gym for your will. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's actually building that connection with your higher I. It's building that connection. It's a ritual that burrows through time and space to connect us with that higher divine wisdom that lives within every single one of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it seems so easy, but try it and tell me what happens.
Yeah, I like it because it's harder than it seems, but it's so simple. And those are the tools that sometimes are right here, but it's a relearning and a remembering. So thank you for that one. That's really good. And
I'll tell you, I would go days, weeks, months without being able to do it. And now I do it at least 6 out of 7, if not 7 days a week. And I'm able to do it. So it's a muscle that builds.
Well, and thank you for saying that, because I think that for me to sit here and say, I've been coaching these many years, I've learned all these things, and have the podcast and to still say, and I struggle with these things. And thank you for saying that. Like, it's taken me years to make this a practice. And so I said that to Shiva Rose. She was on one of the episodes talking a lot about ritual. And I had said something like, you've got it all figured out. And she said, listen, it's taken me time. And I love that, because we tend to project onto the people who we think have it all together. And we're all human works in progress at our own rate too. We're all at our own rate.
Absolutely. I love, there's this crafter that I follow, and she puts together the most beautiful art projects. And she recently did this post that went viral. And she was just like, no makeup, because you just see her hands. House is a mess. You know what I mean? She's like, oh yeah, I have it all together. Her bath. And it's like, that's all of us. All of us are still, we're imperfect. We're trying. And that's part of the normalizing what it means to be human, right?
I love that. And that's what today's, I think, the face of perfection and the woman having it all together. Like, I'm showing up with a cute sweater and some makeup on today, but yeah, usually if I don't have to record something, my hair is up in a bun and my closet is like piled high with the clothes that I didn't put on hangers. So it's like, that's the real deal. And that's what people are craving too. We don't want that forward facing. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about today, because it's on your website, it's part of your offerings, but is really the idea of our experiences as generators of money and income for ourselves, and just like our money story or our money wounds and the things that have kept women back. I think it's comes down not only from our families of origin, but culture and society, about earning potential, about what's possible for women. But what are we sort of healing here as a female collective, and where are we being called to sort of shed old ways, or what can we look at within ourselves?
Sure. I mean, this is something I can speak to because, as someone who's raised capital before, and then having a robust network of very successful women who've raised a lot more than I have. Mm-hmm. And they also now have been so successful, that they invest in other women. Women always ask for a lower valuation. Women always undervalue it. It's like not even the one, it's unbelievable. And even always compared to the male counterpart, they're always asking for, men don't have a problem with it. They walk in asking for a, 30 times multiple on something that isn't even out in the world yet. Yeah. On one hand, I think it's a gift, because I think women naturally, we're connected with the earth in a way that's a little more of the resources of the earth and of this more organic. And so I don't want to dismiss that and I think where we went wrong along the way is saying, for women to be equal to men, we have to be the same. Okay. And not even women and men. It's really that feminine impulse and that masculine impulse, right? So I would say more where we're being called to is for that to be in harmony within our being. Mm-hmm. So we're being called to create within our business and our life masculine structures that support the feminine part of us, that creative, however that shows up for you, so that it can produce a lot of money and income, but also creativity and purpose, and really birth this into the world in a way. So I'll work with very successful women, women that have built $100 million companies, and yet their masculine is not in a container where they feel safe and they feel held and they feel like their systems, right? They're still taping boxes when they're selling their company. They're literally still taping boxes when they've sold their company for $300 million. They're still like, hang up the phone and finish taping that box.
Wow.
And it's amazing to see, right? So where are we showing up? Where are we creating those containers that we can feel held and supported?
Yeah. I think you were talking about last week when we first met is that idea of we're coming towards the center of the healthy masculine and the healthy feminine. And I don't know if you'd say it may or may not be, but when I was thinking about how you described it last week, I was thinking about the taping of the boxes you just described. Could that be possibly the unhealthy feminine who thinks that she has to be overdoing and doing all those tasks that she could outsource to somebody else to feel more blended and more merged with her healthy feminine?
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. Exactly. It's we're talking about the healed version of the feminine and the healed version of the masculine, right? Where the masculine aspect is setting those healthy boundaries. It's saying, hey, this is something that someone else can do because your value in this company is not taping boxes, right? Yeah. Yet that is the unhealed feminine. It's like, I've got to do everything myself, right? I can't rely and trust and lean on others, even the world, right? Or the level of support and nourishment that is available to us just through breathing air, through sitting and being supported by the spirits of form, that is all available. So the unhealed feminine has not yet received that nourishment, right? Is not acknowledging the level of support and nourishment that is always available. And I also see in a lot of people who are growing their businesses, they don't have the correct real world, like funnels and structures and, screening systems set up for them to really rise in revenue, which is just a marker of the value that we're creating, right? So they haven't put in those structures that are supporting them to really being able to focus on what we call like your level of genius or your golden shadow.
So I see that as sort of keys to unlock the next unfolding, the next stage for someone. It's like literal what the things that you can understand better in order to help grow. Because again, those are not things that we learned or come naturally. And there's new ways of doing things.
Absolutely. Yeah. In our business course, like it's our masterclass, the Allow container, we really take real world business tools, right? The same tools that I use to create a $30 million company, but we have tailored them to things like heart-centered marketing, right? Because to a sensitive, feminine person, selling yourself can feel gross, right? And it's really reframing these in a way that feels empowering and supportive and exciting. And that's what really helps us usher in this new level of success. Is often the things that, that new level doesn't feel good for a reason. And it's really getting the correct business tools in place so you feel good about it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's so much to learn there with our money stories. There is a lot to be healed there, and it's really deep work too. I love that you're leading the conversation. I was thinking too, like when you reflect on yourself and you look at the younger version of yourself who sold your company for a lot, like do you look back and see the parts of yourself that were out of balance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, yes, in many ways. I think something that we talk about in VSB that is uncommon is also the concept of wealth poverty. So a lot of us, our culture is very familiar with what it means to have poverty, right? To grow up with not enough in the way that I did. But as I rose in business, I think what became really apparent is this idea of wealth poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is from also a mentor of mine, Lynn Twist. I don't know if you've ever heard of
I've
her, but
heard of
she wrote
her.
a book called The Soul of Money, which is
Mm-hmm.
an amazing book. And, she really talks in detail about this concept called wealth poverty. And I've seen it with my own eyes, right? These children that have grown up in families that have spent, 2% of their time with their parents. They've been raised by nannies. They've been given all the things in the world except love and connection and, real internal ability to like work hard and gain something from their own effort. And this level of starvation of meaning and purpose and connection with their fellow humans is just as much a poverty as the first one. And it is just as much of an epidemic as the first one.
Yeah.
Yet it is glorified often. It's certainly by people like myself early on who didn't understand that, right?
Yeah.
So we get to really redefine what wealth means to us. And I can't define that for you, and you can't define that for me. We get to redefine what wealth means. So when we climb that mountain, it feels good when we get there.
I love it. And what you're doing is such a model for people to really lean into and grow into. And the whole idea, how you said meaning, purpose, and connection, those are like these cornerstones of our businesses that are so vital in order to serve the big needs of today, whether it's with children, whether it's through the businesses. And something you said made me think of, we're all here with this unique thing that we're here to share with the world. Even if it's not within a business, whether it's within the relationships in your family or your friends or your hobby, sometimes it's in business. But I love that, because I love that you are on the forefront of also ushering in this next generation. My kids are older. They're 20-ish on either side. And it's a real privilege too, because we're shaping the minds that are going into the future. And I have a friend, and I've been thinking about having her on, and she wrote a book, I believe it was about the Gen Zers and everything, that the great challenges and opportunities for them. But it's one of those like segue transition conversations that's really important now too.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start talking to these younger generations who are now 20, and like they don't subscribe to the same things. They're not after that white picket fence or the things that we were told mattered. And so I love that conversation, and I love speaking with them and seeing what matters to them and what drives them.
Yep. So do you have an age range you like to work with? Is it like women at midlife, or is it wider, because it's whoever really is yearning to learn in this way?
Yeah, I have been surprised by the younger people that have been drawn to the work. So I think of my ICA or our ICA as different than just an age range. It's more a stage of consciousness. So I would say it's really those people who are moving beyond that manifesting. So they've kind of seen some level of success, or they see through kind of that scrolling on Instagram and that level of perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And they're seeking something wider and deeper and higher than that.
Mm-hmm. And they're really, they've had all those things in front of them, and they're really being called to this earlier. I see it in my own children. And the one thing that I really try to, I think, foster within them is whatever those gifts are that are showing up, they've been with you your whole life. And sometimes we've been kind of persecuted for them, or really suppressed because we were too loud, or we were too boisterous, or we wanted to do, be the actor or the dancer, or the things that were bigger and brighter than the people around us could really tolerate. But if we look back and pay attention, that's what I'm trying to I know we all go on our paths, and we all go in these different directions. That's going to happen no matter what. But I do think if there's that uniqueness, and it can be kind of, that purpose can be teased out a little bit earlier, I'm really for that. Because what if we could, I look at you today and I'm like, this woman is living vibrantly. And that's the way that we all want to feel. So if that's able to be tapped into early and really honored, I love that message.
Me too. I mean, I think that's all of our birthright, right? To live vibrantly, to live connected. And I think, that is I think the beauty of this younger generation is they're just getting that sooner. They don't need to build the $30 million
Yeah.
company, belong to the clubs and fly in the planes. They just get it like right from go. And, I think that's an incredible gift to our planet. So I'm always amazed when those younger people are drawn to the work. And I think it's just like you said, there are these, souls that have come at this time, and, they're just very wise and they see through. They're just not driven by the same level of materialism and consumerism that previous generations, myself included, have been tempted by.
Yeah, and obviously for you and I and the listeners of Mystical Sisterhood, it's like this type of conversation about really the magic of life, the mystery of life, infinite possibilities. You are the one to carry out what you're here for. That's why I love the conversation and what's been born through this. Because I say often, if you would have said, Maureen, like even 3 years ago, would you be addressing all this wide range of mystical topics on a podcast that shouted out to anywhere in the world that a listener picked up their end of the receiver? I would have been like, no, I don't think so. I don't think I'll ever do that. And something within me drew me here. And now I don't have anything that holds me back between what I really want to do and what someone's going to think of me. So I love that, because I've looked at my demographics too, and they go down to like 23 or 25 years old. That surprised me, because I thought I was really talking to women at midlife, but no, more are hungry. And it's cute with my kids, because my son's 23. And I said something, along this speak to him, I don't know, a few months ago. And he goes, Mom, I listen to what you say, because he's old enough that he didn't get all this when he was young. And then my daughter, I think she loves it and she looks at it, but I'm still her mom. And so her finding it on her own paths is what's critical there. And then I always say with my 18-year-old, he has this benefit of having this language, and it really is all about connection to himself first and foremost, but others traveling the path, and then something bigger in the universe. And it's been really joyous to live like this and let go of the old stuff that didn't feel as good. So I'm always about stepping into that. And I was going to say also, this belief that we really can experience in all the different parts of our lives, not just one, not just two, and something else has to really suffer, but collectively for all of us inside.
So beautiful. I love that. I love when working with children too. I mean, very different than how we were brought up, but there's this consciousness coming online or waking up that, obviously we have these gifts that we bring with us lifetime after lifetime, right? Why does one child come in and they're this amazing, like my son's best friend is this incredible artist at 5 years old, right? Yeah. Well, she didn't just come in, like she has worked on that lifetime after lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And so as teachers and parents and, godparents, aunts, whatever, who care for children, if we look at them almost like we're trying to solve a mystery, what is going on? Why are they have this interest and that interest? I mean, my son is a natural, like I couldn't care less about sports, which is of course why I have a child who the one thing he is like, incredible natural athlete, right? And so really watching that and observing it and going, okay, well, we're going to do the summer camp like this. And, I love that our children, just like our businesses, challenge us perfectly.
Yeah.
And that if we just look with that little bit of a question mark, okay, what are they showing right now? Instead of obviously trying to push our ideas or assumptions or the fact that they should go to college or should go to business school, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I barely graduated high school. So really seeing what are their natural gifts and talents, and also what are our own and how are those showing up and weaving throughout. If we look back at our own childhood, you might see, even though, Mystical Sisterhood seems like, oh, I don't know. I bet you'll find little things when you go back to your adolescence and childhood that it's like, oh, interesting. Well, there was that one time.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And then I'm thinking too, like with the conversation with children, there are both, because it sounds like to me that your work is applying to traditional existing business structures and supporting their kind of transformation into the time that is now and being sort of current, and redefining principles, and then the newer businesses and offerings that are coming up that are a little more new agey or new world, just because that's the way that they're being birthed into the world. And that's important to me, because then the child of today coming up is going to have more choices, where that funnel seemed pretty clear before. Like, you go to high school, you go to college, you get the job, you maybe go to graduate school, whatever the things were. And it was like seemingly pretty linear. And now it's like there's just going to be more and more offerings. And that's why I say, if you're a listener here today, if you see me on the street, whatever it is, have the conversation, because there's likely something that's wanting to come alive in and calling forth. And it's not just all for naught. It's not just to fill up some of your free time. It's meaningful. It is your wisdom, and the world needs it.
I love that. There's that saying where two or more are gathered. And, I love this reflection of what an archangel actually means. And if we subscribe to this idea that we all have an angel that follows us through lifetime after lifetime, well, when we gather, those angels arc. So that is what an archangel taps into, a higher form of wisdom. So when we gather, and you can translate that to any tradition that you follow or is meaningful for you, but this is a perennial truth, right? Yeah. Where two or more are gathered, we're able to tap in with the right intentions and heart space to these higher levels of consciousness.
Yeah. And I love it. And thank you for birthing, your creation into the world and making it really beautiful. We didn't even get to say why you called it Venusian.
Right. Yes. So the Venus, the planet Venus, is widely known as the feminine planet. And so it's called the Venusian School of Business, because we can all see, looking around today, it's no surprise that what we need more than anything is that healed form of the feminine to enter, to take that seat at the table. It's time for that healed, whole feminine to take her seat at the table.
And I used to think that some of the feminine qualities were, I think I was a speech pathologist, and I remember they always used to call it soft skills, like some of the skills that the kids had. But I always think of that like the things that I completely undermined that were my sort of superpowers were actually the gifts that I needed to bring forth. And I didn't understand that, no, they weren't quantifiable, but they were really real world skills. And I think that's what's really coming online and coming to the forefront. And yeah, it's good. So before we finish today, is there anything, I mean, we've obviously covered a lot of ground, but anything that I've missed in terms of even the School of Business that you would want to share, and also where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you feel, drawn in some way that you'd like to work with me or our team, you can visit the Venusian School of Business. I'm sure there'll be a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
And we have, really 3 different pathways. So our first pathway is really about, tuning into your purpose. Why did you come here in the first place? The middle pathway is about really aligning with and healing our relationship with money and abundance. So you get to redefine what your relationship with money and abundance look like. And then, the final one is the one we touched on, which is, this allow container that is really these advanced business principles tied into a more heart-centered space, but they're real world business principles tailored to the more sensitive, heart-centered entrepreneurs.
Yeah, there's a lot of us.
A growing number. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So for the listener today, I hope that you go visit Tirzah's work. It's beautiful. And I'm just so grateful to have you here sharing with us, and good luck with everything. Like Tirzah just said, they'll be in the show notes. We'll put all the links, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for having me today. And it was such a pleasure to just, drop in with you and go on this beautiful journey that was unplanned and so delightful.
Okay, great. We'll see you in the next episode to the listeners.
Sounds good. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit MaureenSpielman.com or MysticalSisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.